It's the night of the royal feast. You enter the grand hall. Lords and ladies are watching you intently. You sit down and someone hands you a knife and fork. Then you start eating. With each bite, you may be taking your last. Welcome to my channel, and today we'll look at the terrifying life of a royal food taster. You may think this was a cushy job, an easy position with lots of free food. But you'd be wrong. In fact, it was one of the worst jobs in history. If you survived, you might have thought you'd done well, but that would be deceiving yourself. Every moment was fraught with peril and death lurked around every corner. There was no training, no antidote, no glory, just danger. It wasn't even a prestigious position. They didn't even give the tasters their name back. They were simply known as the taster or His Majesty's taster. This was a gig for those who had fallen out of favor with the monarch or were simply expendable, someone who would draw attention away from the true VIPs at the royal table. To become a taster, all you needed was bad luck and a king who was paranoid. These guys weren't servants, but nobles in theory, members of the elite, or at least they once were. Now they were trapped in an endless cycle of fear and suspicion. Where did this bizarre tradition come from? As far back as ancient history, powerful people had enemies and rivals. Assassinating them was tricky, though kings were usually well guarded, and any attempt to poison them tended to take time. For centuries, assassination attempts went like this: stab in the street, run away. So rulers ate fast, drank hastily, and died suddenly. In 753 BCE, the first recorded use of a food taster appeared in Persia. One story tells of King Cyrus the Great. He heard a rumor that his wife was planning to poison him. To check the rumors, he ordered her food to be tasted by 5 men. All 5 died. Was it poison? We don't know, but the king didn't stick around to find out. He divorced her on the spot. Then there's Egypt, where the pharaohs were so paranoid they often fell victim to overdoses of their own medicine. Tutankhamun was just 9 years old when he took the throne. A year later, he married his sister, and soon after, he was dead. The official line is that he was the victim of malaria. However, more recent research suggests he was poisoned by his own father, Akhenaten. That's right. In the Egyptian royal court, family was no more sacred than anyone else. But while ancient kings were wary, things really kicked off during the Renaissance. Poison became fashionable among the nobility. During the War of the Roses in England, poisoned bread, arrowheads, and even gloves were used. When Henry VIII came to power, his 6 wives started dropping like flies. 2 were executed, 2 died in childbirth, 1 mysteriously, and only 1 outlived Henry. Rumors abound of foul play, although most agree Henry was too incompetent to order such plots. But there's also the possibility that he suffered from undiagnosed porphyria, a disease that can cause violent mood swings, delusions of grandeur, and even premature balding. This new age of assassination prompted a new royal protocol, the taster. This wasn't exactly a full-time job, but more of an on-call gig. Each time the monarch ate, a taster was present. Depending on how nervous the king was, there could be multiple tasters per meal. Henry VIII was notoriously anxious, which meant many tasters ended up 6 feet under. Under Edward VI, the job was formalized. Instead of being an unpaid position, tasters were now paid a salary ranging between £13 and £26 a year. It was still a dangerous job, but at least now they could buy poison antidotes with their pay. Even then, that wasn't enough. Tasting food wasn't the only danger. There were other perils involved in the job. If the taster was accused of trying to poison the food himself, he could face execution. This happened to one unlucky taster, Sir Thomas Bridges, who worked for Henry VIII. The king was convinced that Bridges had deliberately given him bad shellfish. Not only was Bridges executed, but so was his wife. Before she died, she confessed that she and her husband were innocent. She claimed the king had been poisoned by one of his servants, who had done it because he was jealous of Bridges. Her confession did nothing to save her life. Bridges was cleared posthumously by Queen Elizabeth I, but even so, no one offered his family an apology or compensation. When it was time to eat, the taster had to follow a strict set of rules. First, he would step forward, take a small bite of food, and then swallow it quickly. No one could eat before the taster. Everyone watched intently while he chewed and made sure he didn't hesitate, stumble, or drop the plate. The slightest mistake would cause panic. Even sneezing could get the taster killed. Once a taster accidentally flinched when he bit into a fishbone. This caused the king to flee the room, thinking he'd been poisoned. Later, he returned to eat the rest of his dinner. If the king survived, the taster was kept isolated until he showed no signs of illness. He couldn't trust anyone, not the guards, the chef, or the king. For all they knew, he could still be carrying the poison. Sometimes he was allowed to go home, but usually he spent weeks in a guest house near the palace, surviving on cheap food and thin gruel. His nights were spent alone, haunted by nightmares of sudden death and agonizing pain. Being a taster was a lonely existence. People whispered about you behind your back and never invited you to dinner. Surviving was a triumph, but you couldn't enjoy it. Blame would always fall on you. If the king got sick later, you were the prime suspect. If he died, you were next. Most tasters never made it out alive. Once, a taster named John Coster was accused of killing Henry VIII. After Coster refused to eat certain foods, the king followed him around the kitchen, grabbed a chicken leg, and stuffed it in his mouth. He then looked at Coster expectantly and asked him to eat it. Naturally, Coster protested, claiming he was innocent, but he was ignored. Moments later, he was led away to the executioner. Many tasters died from panic, not poison. A French taster named Jean Delaunay was killed by King Louis XIV because he sneezed while tasting a fig. Some tasters tried to trick the system. When Oliver Cromwell seized power in England, the royal cook was given instructions to kill the taster after he tasted the food. So, what did he do? He simply pretended to swallow and waited until Cromwell left the room. He then calmly walked away. Another famous taster was Guy Fawkes, the man whose face has become synonymous with the annual burning of Guy Fawkes Day effigies. He was part of a plot to blow up the British Parliament in 1605. While he wasn't a royal taster, he did work in the royal court as a soldier. While serving under King James I, Fawkes noticed a lack of security at banquets. So he suggested having a taster sample the food first. James, I liked the idea, and so Fawkes became the first professional taster. Ironically, Fawkes would eventually try to kill James I, along with most of the English nobility. But however they managed to survive, the tasters' lives were fragile. The king could turn against you on a whim. Sometimes the king's simply tired of having someone constantly in the background. Or perhaps he wanted to make a public spectacle. Once, King George II summoned a taster to his side and, in front of hundreds of courtiers, forced him to drink a glass of water. Then, he sent him on his way without a word. The taster, believing he'd been poisoned, drank an antidote, threw up, and felt fine. Still, no one understood why the king had called him to his side. The following day, the king ordered the taster's arrest. He was charged with selling royal secrets to the Dutch and spent his final days in the Tower of London. He was finally executed in 1761. Rulers across Europe employed tasters. Rulers in Russia were especially paranoid. Catherine the Great had an entire team of tasters, along with several doctors. One of her doctors, Georg Wilhelm Kosen, published an account of life in the Russian court. He noted that the pressure was intense and the consequences severe. If the taster made a mistake, he wrote, the whole court falls into confusion and consternation. There were many tricks of the trade. Experienced tasters developed ways to fake swallowing pills, spitting them into a hidden container. Some bit their lips hard to draw blood. This made it seem like they'd swallowed a bitter pill. Others took tiny bites, hoping to live long enough to be rewarded for their service. Occasionally, they even bribed servants for a quick getaway. As always, thanks for watching.